Hi, I'm Megan. Welcome to today's live reading of Notebook Mysteries, Art of Deception by Kimberly Mullins, presented by Itsy Bitsy Book Bits. Join me. Prologue. Ah! The man's arms flailed about as he tried to grasp the air around him. It was no use. He plummeted more than 200 feet into the rushing water. The other man stepped back and closed the door of the still moving train. One down, he thought. Chapter 1. Peggy and Tony Morella at their home. Peggy, you need to rest, Tony said as he watched his heavily pregnant wife move back and forth in front of the fireplace. No, I can't. Where is he? She stopped and put her hand on her belly to rub the active baby. He continued to keep his voice low and calm. You saw his apartment. It's vacated. He's gone. But why? He was finally settled here. Are you sure we were in the right place? She asked, grasping at straws. Yes, he said firmly. We've been there before. What if someone took him? Peggy asked as she started to pace again. With all of his things, murmured Tony. She ignored that comment and stopped suddenly. Emma! What about her? Asked Tony with a frown. She's an investigator. She can find him. Tony was an off and on again member of an investigation team that Emma Evans led. I'm not sure, he hesitated. Emma would help, there was no question, but he didn't want to drag her into this potentially complicated mess. Peggy's brother had just come back into their lives. He could tell when he met the man that there was something about him that he didn't trust. Tony hadn't mentioned these worries to Peggy. She'd been so excited when her brother had suddenly appeared back in their lives. I am, she said firmly. Please contact her. She moved to sit beside him. Taking his hand, she pulled it to her belly and said, For me? For us? He felt the baby under their clasped hands. He'd do anything to help calm her nerves. Fine. I'll go see her in the morning. Good, she said, and laid her head on his shoulder. This time, the adventure will start with us, thought Tony. Chapter 2. Emma and Jeremy that same evening. Emma sat next to Jeremy on the settee in the sitting room, reading. It was late, and the other family members had retired to their beds. They heard a knock at the door. Who could that be? Asked Jeremy as he started to stand. Emma shrugged. Let's find out. She stood and walked to the door with Jeremy coming up close behind her. Emma opened the door and blinked when she saw who stood there. Tony, what are you doing here? Is Peggy okay? Emma, give the man a minute, Jeremy said and waved to Tony. Come in. Thanks, Tony said gratefully as he stepped into the foyer and pulled the door shut behind him. Can we go to the sitting room, please? Can we go to the sitting room? He asked. They nodded and the three made their way there. Jeremy and Emma sat back in the settee. Tony moved and sat in the seat across from them. Peggy's the reason I'm here, Tony began. He saw their faces mirror concern and hastened to assure them. The baby's fine and Peggy's fine too. Well, physically anyway. I'd planned to come, but I'd planned to come by tomorrow morning, but I received a note. He reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope. May we read it? Emma asked. He nodded and handed it to her. Jeremy moved closer and read it over her shoulder. Theodore, Peggy called him, Teddy. Was Peggy's brother, explained Tony. He's dead, Jeremy stated as he looked up from the telegram. Trains, murmured Emma. Guess he didn't tuck and roll, Jeremy said drolly. He'd referenced Emma's past experiences fleeing from bad guys by jumping off various trains. Said Emma. Emma, called a child's voice from the stairway. Tony turned toward the stairway and saw a girl about 13 years old standing there. Emma put down the telegram and ran over to her. With a hand placed on her head, she asked the girl, Hen, what is it, baby? Did something wake you up? Henrietta put her arms around Emma's waist, burying her face, and replied in a muffled voice, Bad dream. Emma hugged her close and leaned down to kiss her head. Would it help if I went back up with you? That and maybe a story? Hen negotiated. Emma smiled. I can work that out. She turned to Jeremy and Tony. I'll be back, she said to Jeremy. She missed Tony's frown. Jeremy nodded. We'll still be here. I hope your dreams are nicer, Hen. Me too. Emma took Hen by the hand and headed upstairs with her. Jeremy sat back down and looked at Tony, who was still staring at the doorway, the frown still in place. Something you want to talk about, pal? Tony pulled his gaze from the doorway and refocused on Jeremy. No, no. Who was that? Hen? She's our ward. Ward? Hen needed help, and we, Emma and I, took her in. But Tony looked up the stairs where Hen and Emma had gone. She said, I thought. Jeremy watched him, but didn't comment. He could see his friend was conflicted. Tony finally shook himself and said, No, that isn't why I'm here. Will Emma be back down soon? Jeremy sat back with his arms crossed over his chest. It shouldn't be long. Hen has the occasional nightmare. They sat in silence, with Tony glancing frequently at the entrance. Finally, shoes sounded on the stairs and Emma appeared. Sorry, Tony. I'm sorry, Tony. We want to hear your story. She took the seat next to Jeremy. Hen okay? Jeremy asked. Yes, she fell asleep as soon as I started to read. Tony stared at Emma until Jeremy prompted him. Tony, you were saying? Emma raised her eyebrows and Jeremy subtly shook his head. That topic could be discussed later. She started again, hoping to get her friend talking. I didn't know Peggy had family in town. Peggy had been a widow when they met. Tony seemed to be her only family since they were married. Teddy moved back recently. We were getting to know him, Tony said as he tried to concentrate on Peggy. How long was he here? Inquired Jeremy. Maybe 6 months. Teddy has a home here? Emma asked as she pulled out her notebook and pencil. As she turned to a blank page, she saw that it was filled up from previous cases and she'd need to get a new one. She moved to the desk on the far side of the room and started to pull out notebooks. Each one was full of their prior cases. She dug until she finally found an empty one. Yes, we were there earlier tonight. Why? Asked Jeremy. Dinner. Prearranged? Asked Emma and moved to sit back down. Yes, we have a standing dinner the same day each week since Teddy arrived. You didn't receive any notification that he wasn't there? No, we had no idea until we got there. What did you find at his apartment? Nothing, Tony replied. You weren't able to get in? Jeremy asked. No, he corrected him. The door was ajar and we went in. There was nothing left. His art, furniture, clothes, everything. It was all gone. The only thing left were wires that had been used to hang art. Emma knew that sometimes the clues could be in something minor. We should go there. Agreed, Jeremy said. When? Asked Tony, thinking of Peggy. Emma pursed her lips and glanced toward the stairs. I don't want to be away if Henrietta needs me tonight. Tony let out a sigh of relief. I'm glad you said that. Peggy will want to be there and tomorrow would be easier. Does she know about Teddy? Jeremy asked, holding up the telegram. Not yet. She was resting when it arrived. The stress of him disappearing had gotten to her. He dropped his head into his hands. He looked up, his face showing strain. And now this. I'm not sure how much more she can handle. Emma thought about her previous interactions with Peggy and spoke up. Tony, I think she's stronger than you give her credit for. Her friend nodded but didn't say anything. He stood slowly and moved toward the door. At the entrance to the sitting room, he turned to them. If she gets some rest tonight, she should be able to meet in the morning. We'll meet you at your house in the morning, Emma promised. Thank you, he said, and looked at her again, then up the stairs. He shook his head and went out the door. They followed him out. Tomorrow? He asked again. We'll be there, Jeremy said firmly. Emma closed the door softly, and they heard his feet on the steps outside. Emma turned slowly to Jeremy and said, What was that all about? The murder? Well, I don't know yet. Isn't that why we're investigating? Jeremy? Her tone held a note of warning. Whoa, now, I know what you're asking about. Tony didn't know about Hen and us being her guardians. She frowned. Why does that matter? He shook his head and took her hand in his. Babe, you know why. You told him you never wanted this type of life. It was the reason you gave for breaking up with him. But that was years ago, and we were so young. Emma gripped his hand tightly and asked, He doesn't regret marrying Peggy. And the baby? She thought to herself. Jeremy shook his head. No, I don't think so. I think you were his boyhood dream. Should I talk to him? She glanced at the door, worried for Tony. No, I think it's best we let it go by. She nodded and walked back to the sitting room to sit on the settee. This case is a strange one, she commented, drumming her fingers on her lips. You said it. Teddy, Peggy's brother, who had just moved back to town, goes missing and now he's turned up dead? And apparently died from falling from a train. Other than that, we know almost nothing, except someone out there wanted him dead. And they did get what they wanted and did they get what they wanted by killing him? We won't be able to figure that out tonight. Jeremy looked at his watch and said, Bed. We have an early morning. Yes, she said with a yawn. He stood and offered her his hand. She took it and accompanied him.